You already have $30K on a HELOC and spend $2,000 a month on Amazon and have credit card debt? What's happening here?
A budget is really, it's just a plan on paper. And unless you're pairing that with actually tracking your expenses, like there's no way you're going to hold yourself accountable to it.
Because once you can get back on a budget where you don't need to put things on a credit card, then life becomes better. If it's not an absolute necessity, you're not putting it on a credit card.
They may be adults, but they're still your children. Like they don't necessarily get a say in what the finances are. Like it seems like this is more of a miscommunication between like the husband and the wife.
You have to communicate about your finances and be on the same page as your partner. Like that is the number one thing there. There has to be open communication about that or it's just not going to work.
Your finances don't just stabilize over time. Like you got to be the person who brings some stability to them. And unless you're taking steps like this, like it's just never going to happen.
Welcome to Just Another Money podcast with your hosts, Lauren and Nick. We're here to take real-world money situations and break them down into actionable steps you can actually use.
Whether you're budgeting, paying off debt, or saving for your future, we're all about making finances easy to understand and putting you in control of your money. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today we're diving into all things budgeting, from how to budget for couples and families to planning your expenses with an irregular income. We're breaking down some of our best tips for sticking to a budget. But before we get into that, Lauren, I found this video on TikTok that I wanted to get your reaction to, so let me play it for you.
Quick question. Do you have $10,000 in your checking account? No, not your savings account, your checkings account. Please tell me why Bank of America just called to let me know that next month I'm gonna start having to pay a $24 monthly maintenance fee if I don't keep $10,000 in my checkings account. I shit you not. The guy who told me this on the phone, he literally giggled when he said $10,000. Like, besides the 1%, who has $10,000 just sitting in their checking account? Show yourself.
Okay, Lauren, so how much do you have in your checking account right now?
Not $10,000. And if my bank, which is not Bank of America because I would not use them, if they told me that I was getting a fee for not having $10,000 in my checking account, I would just close the account and go somewhere else because there's plenty of options where you do not have to have a minimum balance. So that is ridiculous. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I've always heard that Bank of America and Wells Fargo are like the two worst banks.
Yeah.
And like, to be fair, I had Wells Fargo since I was like 16 years old. My mom opened me up one of those like teenage accounts.
Sure.
And then I had it, into my 20s. But everyone would always say like, why do you have Wells Fargo? It's the worst account. But $24 a month. I at first I was like, maybe, she's accidentally signed up for one of those like premium member checking accounts where they like just assume your high net worth and they give you like added features, but they charge $24 a month. But I don't know. That sucks. I would definitely be changing banks.
Yeah. They just want to take your money and and use it for themselves. Like they do not want you to make anything off of it. That's crazy. I personally, for my checking account, I don't keep much in there.
Yeah.
I think back before I became like more like literate with money, I felt like having a lot of money in your checking account was like such a good thing. But then like once I've learned more about it, I'm like, actually, I want to keep just enough in there to pay my bills. And like, I keep like my zero is like 1,000. So like, I always just keep like a little extra in there. But everything else, I transfer immediately out into my high yield savings account for my savings goals, and then to my investment accounts. Like I don't like to keep things in there and to be at 0.2% interest. I hate it. So yeah, I'm not keeping that much in my account. I don't care how wealthy I become. Definitely not going to be me.
Yeah. I don't even think my checking account gets any interest, to be fair, but no, exactly right. Like I literally only have the $1,000, like I call it a zero buffer, and then whatever's left in my budget. And so like I checked it when I watched this video. I was like, okay, I have like $2,800 in there. And so like really it's just what I need for my budget, but I don't even have like my direct deposits linked to there. Like those all go into the savings, and every month, like I'll just put stuff into the checking that I need for the month. And so it's never getting past like $10,000 because it's literally just bills and like money to like eat out and groceries and stuff like that. But that's crazy. $10,000. Otherwise you get charged. Like, who's keeping 10 grand in there? Like, even if you have a high net worth, keeping 10 grand in there, like it's not a good use of your money,
No, I know. And I just told my husband this today. I was like, I actually have a lot in my checking right now. I can't even, it's definitely over like 6,000 at this point, but it's because I just started a job and like I'm making significant more than I was. And so I'm just like, I'm budgeting it out, but I'm like, I don't know what to do with it. Which I guess is a really good problem to have. But I've already like put in my budget, like I'm going to move all of it over to our savings account because we obviously, we're going to be saving for a few things here. So I'm like, I just need to get that out of there because it's freaking me out.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, should we jump into the first situation today?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So this one says, how in the hell do you escape living paycheck to paycheck? It seems like no matter how much money I earn, I'm stuck in this constant cycle of putting expenses on a credit card because there isn't anything left by the end of the month. I've tried writing out a budget more times than I can count, but it never comes to fruition. In the last few years, I've gone from making about 40K a year to now earning 72K, but my problems have only gotten worse. What little savings I had has been drained. Credit card debt is climbing and I just don't know what to do anymore. I'm constantly told my friends and family that I need to budget my money, but I can't ever seem to make progress with it. What am I doing wrong?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I hear what this person's saying, right? Like they've written out a budget more times than they can count. And like once those expenses actually start hitting, like reality looks a whole lot different than whatever was in the budget. And I always say this to people, but like a budget is really, it's just a plan on paper. And unless you're pairing that with actually tracking your expenses, like there's no way you're going to hold yourself accountable to it. And because you don't have the clarity to see like where your money's actually going. But, for this person, like if they've gone from $40,000 a year to $72,000 a year, like they've almost doubled their income. Yep. And it sounds like the problems have, like they said, my problems have only gotten worse. And like, that's a clear sign to me, like it's probably not because of your living expenses or things like that. Like I'm sure that contributes to it a little bit, but it's definitely like your spending habits. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the only thing this person can do is like go through like the last 6 months of account statements. And like, I always like to just say like, hey, print it out, take a highlighter. And I guarantee you, if you just go through every single one of those expenses, you're going to find thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars a year of expenses that didn't need to be made or purchases that didn't need to be made. And that's where all the money is going. Because if your debt's continuing to climb, even as your income's climbing, like that's the only reason why,
Yeah. And again, this is exactly how the credit card cycle starts. Like, oh, I'm going to put this on my credit card just to get through the end of the month. And then it just spirals out of control. Yeah. And then you feel really out of control because you're paying so much in credit card payments every month and continuing to put things on it to live. And this person, 40K to 72K, I'm guessing an increase in lifestyle is why they now cannot afford it. And because they're still paying credit card and the interest is building, things like that. That was me, honestly, back. Not the credit card situation. I've never had credit card debt, but just not knowing where I was spending my money. That was a huge thing before my debt payoff journey. The first thing I did was like get my budget under control and like see where all of my money was going. And then it was like, oh, okay. I did not need to spend most of this money I was spending, per month. So like the biggest thing is like, you need to like, first off, you probably just need to like stop using the credit cards right now and really just go like sacrifice everything you can and get that paid off. Because once you can get back on a budget where you don't need to put things on a credit card, then life becomes better. But it's a little bit hard to get there because it is a struggle. But I feel like you just have to like, if it's not an absolute necessity, you're not putting it on a credit card, or you're done with credit cards, right? I'm going to start budgeting my money, only using what I have coming in, and then get those credit cards paid off. And then it starts to become a little bit more doable once you don't have to put things on credit cards and then be paying the payment every month for those, right?
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. Like this person clearly isn't a credit card person. Like, I don't know. At this point, like if things are continuing to get worse, even with your income going up, like I would just say like this person should probably just like cut up those credit cards, close the accounts, like don't even make it a temptation to be able to continue adding onto the debt. But like, kind of like what we were talking about at the beginning, like having your checking account, like once you get rid of the credit cards, having your one checking account set up to where only the money that you have for the month, like in your budget, that's all that's in there. And if you spend it, like you're going to feel the pain of that for the rest of the month. And so maybe that's going to help you get into the better spending habits of sticking to the budget. But yeah, like you got to pair that with tracking things, because otherwise what I see happen all the time when people say like, oh yeah, like budgeting hasn't worked for me. It's like, okay, you're just writing things down on paper, right? Like nothing, what you're doing in reality and what you said you're going to do on that page are like totally different places. And so like, if you're not tracking things, like you can write down whatever you want, right? You can say you're going to save like 100% of your income, but like that's not what's going to happen unless you actually track your expenses. That way, when you go to the store in the middle of the month, like, okay, cool. I got like $200 left for groceries. Like I got to make this last for this last week or whatever it is. But yeah, this person's clearly not doing that. Like, I think that's what they need to start doing to start making progress here.
Yeah. And before I like got into my debt payoff journey, like I would track my expenses, but I didn't have a budget. So I was just like I was just keeping track of what I was spending, but for no reason whatsoever, you know? But after I figured that out and like made a plan to where I wanted my money to go, then I was like, oh, that is so unnecessary what I've been doing over here. You know what I mean? And until you take a look at that and get real with yourself, you're still going to be in this credit card cycle of putting your lifestyle on there and things like that. So yeah, get out of that nasty cycle of credit card debt. And I think life can get a lot better, especially because you're now making 72K, depending on where you live. You know what I mean? And if you have a partner or whatever that looks like. But if you were surviving on 40K a year and you've been up to 72, life can get better up there. We just need to clear up the debt first.
100%. All right, let's move into the next question. So this person wrote, I can't follow a budget to save my life. Is this a good idea? I'm horrible with money. I have a budget that should allow me to save money. Plus I use Rocket Money to track my purchases and expenses. However, it's done nothing to help the fact that I'm so bad at actually following it. I don't trust myself with money, and checking my bank balance gives me such bad anxiety I can't do it. Thanks to my ADHD, even though I have the budget, it's non-existent to me. The notifications Rocket Money sends about reaching my purchase limits doesn't stop me from doing it. I can't stop spending money when I shouldn't be and always seem to be justifying it to myself. I've thought about the cash method, but I tend to spend cash quicker than using a card because it feels like it's already out of my account. One thing my therapist recommended is to open a second account. One is for bills that I charge everything to, then the other card I don't carry on me anymore. Would this idea work? I know how much I pay in bills every month. One account for bills and the other for everything else. Maybe even a step further and withdraw everything out of the second account and just use the cash. Does anyone have another idea for someone who just has no control with money?
Yeah, and I feel for this person, you know, obviously they're working with a therapist, so there's some other things going on there. But for me, it just felt like, and for them, you know, they're making it a little bit too difficult for themselves. Yeah. I feel like sometimes, you know, Rocket Money and things like that can be a little overwhelming for you. And especially if you're checking your bank account. So you have like this app telling you like your limits are there, or this is what, you know, you've purchased this, and then you're looking at your bank account and you're seeing all these numbers and it's just so overwhelming. So I feel like when people get overwhelmed by money, and usually what happens is they get overwhelmed by money and then they just stop budgeting. They stop looking at it. They just kind of like, I'm just going to live my life. I don't want to live in a spreadsheet. Right. Whenever people get to this point, I'm like, okay, then you need to make it really simple for yourself. So I do like what the therapist suggested, you know, having that second account, maybe one that is for all of your bills, right? That needs to be paid. Everything there needs to go into that account. You know exactly what it's going to be, your car payment, your rent, everything like that. The second account could be your spend account. Okay. Like what extra money you have in your budget, that just goes into that account. And then you have that card that you can do whatever you want with at that point. They could also do the cash method. Now, they already said cash doesn't really work for them because they spend it quicker because it doesn't feel like it's because it's already out of the account, kind of like our girl math thing the other week. Yeah. But for, you know, I think they just need to like take all of the thought out of it, like sit down once a month or like, you know, twice a month just to look things over, but make it easy for yourself. Maybe do that, you know, get 2 accounts, transfer everything that you know you need for bills. You've mapped out all of your expenses for your bills, utilities, everything like that. That goes to the account. It's going to be paid automatically out of that if you have that set up. The other account is for your spending. So that then you know exactly how much you have on that card. You know how much you've budgeted out to, you know, spend whatever, however you want to do it. And then just keeps it simple for yourself. So when there's no money left on that card, or you get down to $100 or whatever you want to set it at, then you're done, right? There's no more thinking about, oh, this is what my bank account has. This is what Rocket Money is telling me. It's just, you know, the numbers and it is what it is. And there's not more thought to it. I think that's where a lot of people need to get, because there's just way too much going on in their brains for this. And I get it. It's frustrating. So taking some of that out of it and just knowing exactly what you have to spend for the month and going from there. What do you think, Nick?
No, I love that idea. And I do think it sounds like this person is probably giving their expenses, as funny as it sounds, like almost too much thought. Like they're overthinking it so much that's where I think a lot of the stress is coming from. But I do think that's a good idea, right? Like having one account where you know where all of your fixed expenses that's coming out of, you know exactly how much, you can just load it up with that. And then having a second card where when that gets to zero, like you're done, like you're out of cash for the month. It's funny. Like I feel like the cash, like envelope method or cash stuffing, like I feel like that was really popular like 10, 15 years ago. But like now there's so many places I go to where they don't even accept cash anymore. And so it's such a pain. But I do see like the benefits of it, but I think this is a great alternative for it. Now, You know, what I found for a lot of people who have like financial anxiety, I feel like they've never, you know, they were never raised talking about money. And so money in general is just kind of this funny subject that they don't feel like that they can openly talk about. Yeah. And then because of that, they don't really look at the numbers, and that because they're a little stressed out about it. And now those question marks in their head, they start filling those question marks with worse and worse ideas. Mm-hmm. And then that's what leads to more anxiety. So it's almost like it's like a cycle that they keep falling into. And like, I feel like most people are better off saying, hey, like, let me just spend one weekend or one evening, whatever you need to go through all the numbers, get really clear on it. And that's going to like, I'm going to front load all the stress into just doing that. But once I get past that point, that's when I can actually have clarity. And at least once you've removed a lot of those question marks, that's what I found is like, okay, now it's not a question in my head anymore. And even though the reality of it might be scary, it's probably not as bad as what I thought it was. Yeah. I think if you can kind of have full clarity over the situation, like one, like that's going to be the only way you can actually make a plan. But two, at least you can remove the doubt and the second guessing from yourself. And I think that's going to really help with the anxiety. But yeah, this person, they got to do something to simplify it, because it sounds like they're really overthinking it.
Yeah. And I think, honestly, I think this is what happens to a lot of people. They just put way too much thought into it. Now, if you're someone like me, I love putting thought into my money, and I love tracking down to the nitty gritty. I don't need to, but I like to, you know. A lot of people do not like to. So they get into this overwhelm, and then they just decide like, I'm not going to do this anymore. It's not worth it for me to feel this way. So you have to make it simple. I had a client one time that I worked with, and she budgeted by paycheck. So she would do every 2 weeks. Okay. And you know, we had a map out of like, she had $300 for those 2 weeks that she could spend on whatever she wanted to, whether that was coffee, whether that was going to Target, you know, things like that. She had a lot of credit card debt that she was paying off. So we were balancing that out by allowing her to still spend, so she wouldn't put things on her credit card. And she really liked that, because she would actually go withdraw it. So she had $300, and she'd be like, this is what I have for the next 2 weeks. So if I spend it all on day one, then guess what? I'm not going to have it until 2 weeks from now when I get paid again. Right. So just keeping it simple for her really seemed to work, because you had the plan for the rest of your money, and then here's what you can spend. And then that's it. Set it and forget it. Come revisit in 2 weeks or whatever time of the month you like to, you know, look at your money, and then go, you know, just go from there. Stop overthinking it, having all of these different notifications coming up, checking your bank account constantly. If you're checking your budget regularly, you probably shouldn't have to check your bank account, other than to make sure, you know, that there's no fraudulent charges or anything like that.
It's funny. I'm almost the opposite. Like I know, like for most people, when they overthink something, especially when it's money, like that's what leads to the anxiety. That's what gets them stressed out. But I feel like for me, like overthinking it, or definitely spending more time than I need to thinking about it, at least, that's like what kind of brings like calm to me. Cause I'm like, cool. Like I know all the numbers, like I have it all kind of, it's in my bank account, but I also have like a spreadsheet where all my numbers are, and I kind of am constantly updating that. Like to me, that's kind of like the soothing part of it. And like, I know it's totally backwards for most people, cause people tend to like hate budgeting. They hate the process of like inputting their transactions, and it's super necessary if you want to get this stuff cleaned up. But for me, like, I'm at a point where like, okay, I could probably just put whatever I needed for my monthly budget inside of my checking account, and I could probably stay within it like 99% of the time, even if I didn't have a budget. But like for me, like having the budget, that's what brings so much peace to my mind when it comes to my finances, because I'm not second guessing, right? Like I know everything that's going on with my money, and that makes me feel better. But I also recognize most people would probably call that overthinking it, and that I probably spend too much time on my finances. But I don't know. It's just something that also makes me happy too. You know, like it's fun.
I mean, I'm the same way as you, Nick. I mean, I think that's why we have this podcast, but I like tracking my expenses. I used to do it weekly, and probably within the past 2 months, I've been like, okay, Lauren, you're going to push yourself to only track like maybe every other, even every 3.
Oh, that would kill me.
I know, but I'm not a big spender, really. So like, I don't really need to. I just like to keep on track of it, just so like I don't have to do like a month's worth at one time. But I am trying to get away from it a little bit. Like, is there ever a day that I don't track my expenses? Potentially. Like I want to get there, just because I shouldn't have to do that all the time, but I do like it. It makes me feel more secure. Like, okay, I know exactly what I have left for the rest of the month. And that's where I'm at. But, you know, we're far into our financial journey, so I think that's totally fine if we want to do that. But, you know, I think a lot of people need to start there at least.
Yeah, 100%. I am such a nerd about it. Like when I get home from like the grocery store or like my wife comes home, she's like, oh, here's a receipt. I'm like, awesome. Let me just input it into the budget. Like I'm so excited to do that. She's like, you're always doing it. Like, don't you hate that I don't like input things? I'm like, no, I love doing it. Like, like if you want to go for it, but you don't have to.
Oh my gosh. I don't even think my husband gets a receipt. It's long gone before he gets home. So
yeah.
Oh, that's funny. All right, let's jump into the next one here. All right, so this one says, I'm going crazy over here. How do you get your family on a budget they'll actually stick to? We're a family of 4 with 2 grown children living at home. My husband and I are both recently retired. He and my daughter think I'm crazy for constantly worrying about money. We bring in plenty of income, but somehow by the end of the month, we're always putting things on credit cards. We have no car payments and our mortgage is very low, although we have some credit card debt and owe $30K on a HELOC. To top it all off, we spend over $2,000 every month on Amazon. I'm constantly getting yelled at anytime I mention a budget. Am I going crazy?
Oh my God. It sounds like the rest of your family's going a little crazy. Like, I mean, I don't know how old like her adult children are, right? Like they may be 19 years old. And so that may be more understandable, but I'm kind of imagining like a 30-year-old, like 2 30-year-old adult children at home who are like dictating how the budget's being, not even a budget, how the spending is going. And then when mom tries to like rein things in, they're like, no, like you're crazy. But I don't know. Like, I feel like if they're adults, like if they want to live at home and you're cool with that, that's your own deal, right? But I do think that they should be bringing in their own income, right? Responsible for their own needs. And then that they should be contributing to the household at some way because you're giving them free rent, right? You're giving them a place to live. You're probably cooking most of the meals. Like hopefully you're not doing their laundry also. But they're also like, they may be adults, but they're still your children. Like they don't necessarily get a say in what the finances are. Like it seems like this is more of a miscommunication between like the husband and the wife, right? Like the husband kind of gets to hide behind like the kids getting in the way of the argument. But like at the end of the day, like they're not aligned on what the plan is for the future. And, even if they bring in a good income off of their retirement savings, like having credit card debt and $30,000 on a HELOC into your retirement age, like, what are you doing? Like, I don't know. Things seem like they're a mess. And if you have the flexibility to spend $2,000 a month on Amazon, you could have gotten this cleaned up so much quicker. It's just, I don't think she's going crazy at all.
No. And immediately when I heard the $2,000 every month on Amazon, like, I'm sorry, you're putting things on credit cards, but you're spending $2K on Amazon every month. You need to cancel your Amazon subscription. I don't care what you're buying on there. I think people rationalize a lot of things on Amazon. But if you really had to like go to Target and get those things, like I'm not sure you would actually spend on them. Right. Because 100%. A lot of it is just an impulse purchase that you're like, oh, I think I want to get this. I'll be honest, I've fallen into it before. But once I get it back under control, I'm like, okay, I'm actually going to put this on a list and then decide at the end of the week if I actually need it. Sometimes those things fall off and I forget all about it. That's the first thing I'm doing here. But yeah, you need to get aligned with your husband and your kids. I don't care how old they are. Like if you're saying they're grown children, I'm going to say they're probably over 18 and probably working. They do not get a say in your finances and they should probably be contributing a little bit, especially because of all the credit card debt and stuff that you have. Yeah. This is insane.
Yeah. I mean, the whole family sounds like they have like a clear spending problem. And I think when it comes to like, how do you get them to stick onto a budget? First, I don't think you need to get your family to stick on a budget. I think you need to get you and your husband to stick on a budget. And then the kids need to do whatever they're going to do because they are adults at this point. If they want to mess their finances up, that's what they can do. Hopefully they won't. But I think you got to worry about your household, which is you and your husband at this point. The kids are living at home, but they're responsible for themselves as well. And I think you kind of got to just sit down with the husband, alone with the husband, and kind of explain what's going on. Like walk him through the numbers. Like, hey, like what are we going to do about this HELOC? What are we going to do about this credit card debt? And the fact that we're, I would imagine that they're spending everything that they bring in from their retirement income, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? Like you planned for this retirement. If you're withdrawing at an appropriate rate, like that's okay. But is this money being blown on stuff that like you don't need, or can you put it towards a better use? Which one of them would be getting out of debt, but then also like what else do you want to be doing with your retirement? Do you want to be spending all your money on Amazon shopping trips? Like, I don't know. I think it sounds like the husband and the wife, they kind of just need to be more aligned with like, hey, is this what we wanted out of our like golden years of retirement? Or is there like something bigger that we want to be doing with our lives? Because they're just not aligned at all right now when it comes to spending.
No, I'm guessing the grown children are probably like, they're probably still paying their phone bills and like groceries and like everything like that, that they paid for their entire lives, maybe even insurances, like because they're on a family plan or something. I'm guessing that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're never going to make a budget that your family will stick to. Like, yeah, her and her husband need to get on the same page because they're definitely not at this point. So I think before you even talk money with him, I think they need to dream a lot bigger. Like you said,
Yeah.
is this what we want for our retirement? Debt, more debt, and our kids like making fun of us, like how we're spending our money. Like that's a really quick way to like not have any retirement because you already have $30K on a HELOC and spend $2,000 a month on Amazon and have credit card debt. What's happening here? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. The husband and the wife have a lot more of a problem than the budget that they're on, honestly.
Yeah, no, I would 100% agree with that. Like, it sounds like the husband may be the one who's kind of like instigating all of this and is able to kind of hide behind the protection of the kids. Right. And you see this all the time. Like, it doesn't matter whether it's the husband or the wife. Like, if you two aren't aligned with what you want to be doing with your money, like the money then is kind of the least of the problems. Like, your communication as a couple is just it's not on point, and you got to get that down, because then the money becomes a symptom of that. Not being aligned with where your values are is what leads to probably this HELOC and the debt and the thousands of dollars on Amazon. But I'd be curious to see what the rest of their spending is, to see how much more beyond just Amazon is probably being wasted on things that they didn't need, and probably on things that don't go to them at all, that are entirely for the adult kids, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. They need to start with their relationship first and then figure out the budget stuff later, because that's honestly the problem at this point.
All right, taking a quick break from today's episode, Lauren and I have some exciting news we'd like to share with you. If you're feeling stuck with your finances and don't know where to start, we have you covered with our one-on-one financial coaching.
These are no strings attached coaching sessions that you can sign up for today. No ongoing commitment. You simply book a session whenever you need one.
Each call is 90 minutes, and by the end of it, you'll have a clear budget to work with and a solid plan to start paying off your debt. Plus, we'll make sure you walk away with some awesome tools to keep you on track, including our budget dashboard and expense tracker, as well as our debt payoff optimizer.
And the best part, you'll get to work with both of us on the call. Together, we'll help you develop the best possible strategy forward, answer your questions, and make sure you feel confident about managing your money.
So if you're ready to get a handle on your budget and kickstart your financial journey forward, check out the link in the show notes to book your first session.
We can't wait to get started with you. Now, back to the episode.
Why don't we move into the next one, which is a great follow-up to this question. So this one, this person wrote, how should we budget as a couple? I was just curious how you manage your finances as a married couple, and maybe why. Do you combine both salaries, take out the expenses, and split the difference each month? Do you just let your partner send you money to cover all expenses? Do you have certain bills or expenses that you're each responsible for? I'm trying to figure out the best way that would work long-term and also allow for independent accounts for each person to spend on their own hobbies. What should we do?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I think, Nick, you and I have different philosophies around this. First thing, when you're talking about budgeting as a couple, I think you need to make sure, are you already communicating about your finances? You know what I mean? That's like step one. So if you don't communicate with your partner at all about your finances, probably none of these things that they suggest are going to work, just because you're not really on the same page with your money. So for example, my husband and I, we do keep things separate, but we have great communication, very transparent about, we know everything about each other's finances, right? So we like to keep two separate accounts. And then for us and our bills, like we don't have a joint account where we'll keep those things. We do have a joint savings account where our savings goals go together. But as far as our bills that we pay, we do like a percentage-based approach. So just until recently, our incomes were pretty similar. So we did do like the 50-50 split, and we would just pay our own things. Like at our old house before we moved to Chicago, I would pay a lot of the like utilities, the HOA fee, things like that. And he would pay the mortgage out of his just because it would, essentially be down the middle for us there. But I know, and I think something that they mentioned here that's, I think, a really good idea is for couples to have like that joint account where they can both contribute for the bills and then pay the bills out of that account. And then you can have your own account for, anything, any, discretionary spending, things that you want to do. But I think the biggest thing is communicating about it, what's fair for each of you. I don't think that if someone's making 300K and the other person is making 50K, that you would do an even split down the middle. There has to be a percentage based approach, and there is a math equation on that. I'm not going to go into it here, but I do love the percentage based approach, and I know a lot of people that use that, especially for like rent and things like that.
Yeah, no, 100%. And like you said, you know, you and I, like the way that we manage finances in our own relationships, like it looks totally different on the outside, but like what's underlying all of that is like the constant communication, and then the shared values around what we think about money, like how we spend money, like our kind of beliefs around debt, things like that. And, you know, that's what makes you able to have different methods for approaching your money as a couple. And then all those methods still have the same like chance of success as long as that underlying stuff is there. But like, yeah, like you said, like, you know, for me and my wife, like I typically call it like 100% joint method. And so we have literally one checking account and then like 2 joint savings accounts. And then we each have our own like investing accounts, because that stuff you can't really combine, but like both of our incomes gets deposited into like one savings account each month. And then we kind of figure out what the budget is together, right? So we'll sit down before the new month starts, where we'll see, cool, does the budget look good? Do we need to make any tweaks? Like maybe she'll add stuff to it, maybe I'll add stuff to it. And then we just load that money into our account. And like really for us, like that's just been simplest for us. And to be fair, we dated for a really long time before we got married. And so we kind of like, you know, kind of grew up together in a sense. And so like that just kind of made a lot of sense for us. But, you know, what I usually recommend for people who aren't, who maybe don't want to go that route is usually like a 95% joint method, like you had said, where like you have that joint account for all the joint expenses, and then you just have your separate accounts for separate things that, you know, if you want to go get your hair done, or he wants to go do whatever, right? Like you kind of have your own individual money. And I think that's something that this person, it sounds like that's kind of what they're looking for, where a way that they can work together long term, but then still have that independence to do whatever they want. And I like what you said about bringing up the percentage based method, because even if you have that joint account, you can still figure out like, cool, what's a fair amount for each of us to contribute to that joint account? Does that cover all of our expenses? And then we're each left with whatever's the balance of our own incomes. And then we can kind of just spend it as we need to. But yeah, I don't think there's like one right way to do it at all. I think you two got to figure out what works best for you, you know?
Yeah. And honestly, I feel like, you know, my husband and I have just been doing it the same way for so long, but I really do love like the 95% joint method. Like have that account where you can pay all of your bills out of, that you're both putting money into, and then just have your own account where you can, you know, spend how you want and don't have to like, you know, keep track of it. I don't know if I could ever, and Nick, I'm surprised by this with you. I don't think I could ever, you know, completely combine finances with my husband, because his spending, it's not sporadic, but like I would have a lot to track. You know what I mean? Like I like to track expenses, but I don't know if I want to track his expenses. So for me, I'm just like, I can definitely see us doing, maybe we will, maybe we'll transition to this, like, you know, get a joint checking account that we can just like pay things out of. And then, you know, I'll start there and see how that goes with him.
Yeah, no, I think it works really well for us, because like I'm the nerd when it comes to finances, but I'm also the one who is definitely more of like the spender out of us. She is by far the saver, and like hates to spend money. And so like anytime she's like going to go do something, it's like a once a month occasion, you know, otherwise we're doing stuff together, we're buying groceries together. And so that stuff is all joint. But like, I think it works out because she probably doesn't have nearly as many expenses as I do. But you know, it's all written into the budget that she can spend as much as she wants. She just is a person who doesn't like to spend a whole lot of money. But I would imagine if she had, you know, significantly more expenses than me, there'd probably be like, it probably wouldn't be as fun. It probably wouldn't maybe work as well. But yeah, you know, you kind of got to just try different things and see what works. But no, it works great for us, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, like we've touched on so many times, and we'll continue to, you know, talk about, you have to communicate about your finances. That is the biggest thing here. I don't care if you have 3 accounts, you know, for each, whatever you want to do with them, you have to communicate about your finances and be on the same page as your partner. Like that is the number one thing there. Transparency, you know, you just have to know the ins and outs of your money, regardless if you have a shared account or if you keep everything separate. There has to be open communication about that, or it's just not going to work. So
Yeah, 100%. And you know, I don't know what this couple's situation is. In my mind, it sounds like this is maybe like a newly married couple. They're kind of trying to find a way to combine things that works well for both of them. Like, I think this is absolutely a conversation that should be had like before you get married. And not to throw any shade to, it's good that these people are talking about it now, but like just money in general, like, are you two on the same page with money? Because financial like arguments, that's like one of the highest causes of divorce. And like, if you two aren't aligned with your money, even if everything else is great, like money pours into every other part of your life, and it's going to constantly be like a thread that's getting pulled that like, man, this just like, we're great relationship wise, but when it comes to money, we just fight about it, you know? So these are the kinds of conversations you got to be having when you're going to decide to spend your life with someone, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because we know the divorce statistics, and a lot of it breaks down to finances.
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure.
100%.
All right, let's jump into the next one here. So this is a great question for you, Nick. This one says, how do I budget with a fluctuating income? I've been trying to budget my money these last few months, but it feels impossible with an irregular income. I rarely know what I'll be bringing in for the month until it's all said and done. So while my budget can be well-intentioned, I'm rarely able to follow through with it. Some months my income is substantially higher than others, which finally gives me some breathing room, but then I'm back in the cycle of trying to make ends meet. I feel like I make a decent amount by the end of the year, but it almost never feels like that month to month. How can I make a budget that actually works for me?
This is probably the question that got me started on like all of my financial journey, was because I started out my career as self-employed freelance and you know, creating content for gyms, right? Yeah. In the fitness space. And like, every single month, it was always a struggle because I didn't know, like, even if I wanted to write out a budget, like this month's income was going to be different than the last. And I also didn't know what that income was going to be until the end of the month. And so like this person said, you know, you can write out a super well-intentioned budget, but like until you actually know the real numbers, you're kind of just playing a guessing game. And so what I found that really worked for me to at least jumpstart this process was to kind of figure out like, all right, over the course of the last 6 months or a year, like if you have a long history in doing this kind of work, like what does your average month look like? What does like the highs typically look like? What do the lows typically look like? And then once you kind of know, like, all right, on average, I think I can at least bring in this amount. Let's just start budgeting with that kind of like on the lower end of that spectrum. Let's use that as the number to budget with, at least to start out with. And then anytime you hit that number in a month, cool. Now I can set the rest of that money aside. A lot of people like to call it like a hills and valley fund or a high and low fund, to where anytime you make more than whatever you need for the month, you're setting that money aside until you've built up a nice pot of cash. And then on those low months, you can start to pull from that to kind of bring some stability across the finances. But like, I think I said this in another episode, and like, it's really true. Like if you're self-employed or you have a fluctuating income because your hours can change, or maybe you work in like the service industry and you're highly dependent on tips, like your finances don't just stabilize over time. Like you got to be the person who brings some stability to them. And unless you're taking steps like this, like it's just never going to happen, you know?
Yeah. And I feel like, you know, usually whenever there's like a fluctuating income for me, like I've never had like a fluctuating income like that. It's typically pretty stable. But what I think would work is, let's say you can at least bring in, I don't know, $2,000 a month. Like that's just your baseline budget there. So you're going to put in that budget everything that's like essential for you to survive. Now, if you're working on debt payoff or working on savings, let's say you have a better month, then you can add in those things on top of that. But to just like make sure you're living on that 2,000, and then, you know, you surprise yourself and bring in 5,000, you have extra money. But like you said, set some of it aside. So, you know, maybe have an emergency fund that is a little bit, you know, bulked up for the situations like this. But I think, you know, working off of your baseline budget could be a good idea. And then just, you know, it's a cherry on the top whenever you get extra income and you can pay off more debt or put more to savings and things like that. I think that would help this person, especially with their mindset around it, because it just feels like, okay, well, my income is fluctuating, so I just can't make a budget and follow through with it, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I like what you said about the baseline budget number. And I feel like you can almost get to that number working backwards too. Like, like saying, like, especially if you're someone who's self-employed who doesn't, you know, you feel like it's a constant struggle month to month because you don't feel like you earn enough. Like, all right, what do I absolutely need to bring in, right? Like once you kind of have all those numbers written out, like your basic necessities, like if you got debt payments to take care of, like all the other bills, excluding like the wants and the other discretionary spending, like what do you need to actually really earned this month. And then every single month that you hit that, you can kind of take like a deep breath of fresh air and say, like, all right, I'm good for this month. And I think that's a really solid place. But, you know, usually what I recommend for people when it comes to budgeting for self-employed is like, once you get past that point, you can kind of consistently hit that month to month, and you can start to build up that peaks and valleys fund. Yeah. Once you get to enough to where you could cover a full month of income, like I always tell people, like start getting 1 month ahead. And so use that pot of cash to fund your next full month. And then any income you earn that month, just set it aside for the following month. It's at least going to let you know, one, like how much can I actually budget for the month ahead? And then two, it gives you that 1 or sometimes 2 month buffer between something maybe going wrong with your freelance business and having to deal with that situation in reality. You get that kind of month buffer.
Yeah. And I think that you're giving a good perspective to this, because maybe people in this situation with the fluctuating income, you know, maybe they do have some savings and they feel like they're always pulling from their savings to, you know, make the ends meet for the month. But it's like, that's what it's supposed to be doing, right? So creating that hills and valley fund, like you mentioned, is exactly what that's for. So I think this person just needs a reframe, because they're saying by the end of the year, I do make a decent amount, but it never feels like that month to month. So I think just putting your money in the right places and knowing like, okay, there are going to be some months that it's lower, and I'm going to have the savings are here where I'm going to pull from to bring it into my budget for that month to almost even it out. Once they flip that around and change the perspective, I think things would actually get a little bit better for them, because they do make decent money, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I really like that this person's actually trying to figure it out, right? Like they've gone through a few budgets and it hasn't worked, but they're still here asking a question of how do I get through this? Because what I find is so many people say like, oh, like my income fluctuates, so like I can't budget. It's like, no, you like need to budget. Like if you're low income or your income fluctuates, like you need to know every single dollar, where is it going? And like we talked about, like budgeting is a huge part of it, like having that plan, but then also tracking the expenses. Because especially as someone who's self-employed, like there's so many things that you could be spending money on between your personal life and the business that like it's so easy for like, you know, the $10, $15, $20 purchases to just kind of fall through the cracks. And then you got like 15 of them, 20 of them throughout the month. That's how hundreds or even thousands of dollars just kind of get wasted, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Well, why don't we move into our last question for the day? So this person asks, how do I get better at budgeting? Fortunately, I'm not a balls to the wall kind of spender, but I do seem to be spending a little bit more than I should. What's the best way to keep track of little purchases? I'm pretty good on not spending on the big wants over $1,000, but the little things seem to be a problem and add up quickly. I make enough money to pay off my credit card every month, comfortably afford my mortgage, and no car debt, so my income to debt ratio is okay. I'm just trying to figure out how to maximize my savings for some of the bigger wants of the future.
Yeah, I love this question. It is the little things. We've talked about this so much. Like it's like the little ankle biters that are the problem. You know, it's rarely those big ones. It's the little things that really add up. But this was something that was really big for me when I started my debt-free journey, because this was me. I could pay off my credit card every month, could afford my rent, you know, had a smaller car payment back in the day. But I felt okay. But I was just like, you know, I hate living paycheck to paycheck. I hate the feeling like I'm spending all of that I have and I don't really have much savings to show for it. So I think the biggest thing is, you know, what's the best way to keep track of the little purchases? Like, you know, we have to do what we've said this entire episode. Like you have to track your expenses and see where you're spending that and what that looks like for you every single month. Is it something that you really need or is it not? And I think for this person, you can, you know, I like to keep a little miscellaneous spot in my budget.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, just because like you're never... I think if you tried to like budget down to each individual category, it's going to become too detailed, and then you're not going to follow it anyway. But give yourself some wiggle room to have these little purchases. But you know, I don't know. For me, I like to just keep a little pot there just so I can spend on the little things and not, you know, worry about it. But maybe just set a limit for yourself. You know, like we talked about with the person earlier in this episode, that just feels like they have a spending problem. Like give yourself that money and say, okay, for this week, I'm allowed to spend $150 if I want to. And it's not going to be a problem because I have it. Right. And then I have this amount going to savings. I think the biggest thing is planning out your money, planning out the savings first, planning out that miscellaneous category in your budget, knowing exactly what you want to spend it on. Because if they're little things and they're, you know, not things that you don't really need, then maybe you can reallocate some of that money towards savings and then just keep a little pot of money that you could spend on whatever you want to spend on, you know?
Yeah, 100%. I'm so glad you said it because, like, I feel like a lot of people tend to think like, oh, I don't make large purchases. Like I don't buy like $500 things or $1,000 things, and so I'm good. And it's always the little ones, like the death by a thousand cuts. Like I've said that so many times, and I always love that saying because like people don't imagine that like, oh, like a $5 purchase here or a $10 purchase here, like those things add up. And like one of my favorite statistics is that $27 a day every single day of the year. That's how you spend $10,000 without even thinking about it.
Yeah.
And like, when was the last time you went to Target or you went out and got coffee, and all those little things added up to at least $27 that day, right? Like that's how you're wasting so much money. But, I'm not always a huge fan of like the pay yourself first kind of like method of budgeting where you set your savings stuff first. And the only reason I'm not a huge fan of that is because like I know I can be disciplined enough in my budget to say, okay, cool. Let me make sure I have all of my basic necessities, all that stuff met, and then I can focus on the savings and then the wants. But I do think for people who are struggling with balancing their everyday spending on things with their savings goals, like, yeah, you do kind of have to front load that savings, and then whatever's left over, now you can spend that guilt free because you're on track with your savings goals.
Yeah.
And so whether you call it like paying yourself first or whatever, like in the budget, what really should be happening is that at the end of the budget, that's where all those unnecessary expenses come in. They come in after you've allocated money for the savings goals to make sure the mortgage can get paid, like the car, everything else that's important. And then, like I said, you can spend kind of guilt free and not have to worry, am I on track with my savings goals?
Yeah. I feel like the death by a thousand cuts hits me like around like Christmas time.
Yeah.
And my friend and I were talking about this because she was like around Christmas, like you just have to run out and get this for like a Christmas party, or you got to get this. And then it's like $40 here, $40 there. And then you look at your budget and they're like, oh my gosh, I've way overspent. Like I think my miscellaneous category for like December was like $700. And I was like, this is so silly. Like I don't want to have that every month. You know what I mean? But I know sometimes it does happen. So, but yeah, it's just like understanding like where you're going to be spending the money. But I personally like to allocate my money into the savings and wherever it's going first. And then I put a little bit of money for my miscellaneous expenses. That's my fun money every month that I get to do whatever I want with it. So that's how I do it. I don't think you have to cut it all out of your budget and not buy anything. I think it's fun to buy stuff. If you want to go into Target, if you want to go get coffee, I think that stuff is super fun. But having a plan for it and making sure you're following through with it and checking in, so they're not just a bunch of little expenses that's eating away at your budget.
Yeah. And you had mentioned it earlier where you said when you were working with someone, you still included, even though they were paying off debt, you still included opportunities for them to go out and spend money. And like a lot of times, like I'll almost get pushback on that because they're like, every single dollar should be going towards paying off that debt. And I'm like, yeah, in an ideal world, 100% agreed, right? But if this is a person who's going from having overspent for years, and that's where the credit card debt's coming from, like to go full cold turkey, like it takes a very particular type of person, and chances are you're probably just going to set yourself up for failure. But if you say, cool, I'm going to allocate most of my extra money towards paying off debt, and then still give myself kind of that mental breathing room to go out and do the things that, in most cases you were overspending because you actually enjoyed those things. And even though you felt guilty afterwards, now you can put it into the budget and say, all right, still working towards my goal. Now I can feel okay about spending this money, and you're probably going to have a lot more success with that.
Yeah. Now, I feel like that's also related to like dieting, right? Like I remember when I prepped for a bodybuilding show many years ago, it was very intense and there's no wiggle room whatsoever. So then after the bodybuilding show is over, then you eat all the sweets and gain like 10 pounds, actually probably 30 pounds actually from where you were at. But for me, for my debt payoff, I was that person that was super intense and cut out I was never really a big spender. I've never had credit card debt or anything like that. So for me, whenever I'd started my debt payoff journey, I was like, I am not spending anything. Nick, I don't think I bought clothes for 2.5 years. I just wanted it to be done. And I was like, this is the fastest way. So every single dollar I have, I am going to put towards this debt and get it paid off. But I know that not everybody is crazy like we are. So I understand that people like to, have a little bit of splurging here and there. So allow yourself to do that, but also have a plan on the side, which is what I think is going to make the biggest difference for people. Like I said, it's like dieting. If you go too hard one direction, it's going to, slingshot in the whole way into the other direction. And then it's just going to get bad again. So yeah, for this person, I definitely think that, they can give themselves a little wiggle room. They're doing okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but Yeah, it's up to them. Like, what do you have any goals that you want to achieve rather than just these little things that are, attacking your budget really?
Yeah, no, 100%. And like, it just based on how they worded this question, like I'm pretty good on not spending on the big wants, like over $1,000. I'm like, in my mind, like something that's over like $200, that's a big want for me. Yeah. And so like, it sounds like this person does like to go out and spend things and have nice things. And so like, if they're at a place where they don't have any debt, like they can pay off their credit cards each month, they don't have any car loans that they're worrying about, like they've gotten to the place in their finances where they should be able to spend some of their money. It's just making sure that they're setting the right limits for themselves. And that way they can kind of get excited about the progress that they're making. And that's also why another reason why I like to track things so meticulously is because I get really excited with seeing the progress every single month, like seeing that account balance go up, or in my note sheet when I write it down, like I just added like $500 or more towards this goal. Like that's the stuff that I get excited about. That also makes it a whole lot easier to say, all right, that thing that I want, like I don't need it. And so I can wait until I've made a little bit more progress, or maybe save up a little bit over the next, 4 or 5 months to be able to purchase that without taking such a hit now,
Yeah, definitely.
Now I had a question for you. So, it sounds like you and I both like we're pretty in tune with continuing to budget, even though we're probably in a place with our finances where like we probably don't need to budget, right? What would you say for someone who like they hate budgeting, but they know they got to do it to stay on track? And so a few years have gone by, they've made really good progress. When would you say is okay for them to say, you know what, like you don't need to budget anymore? And what does it kind of look like for them to transition away from budgeting?
Good question, because I've been budgeting for years and years. But I think, there's tons of people out there that don't love budgeting. They don't want to be in the spreadsheet. I think the biggest thing is just showing that, like proving to yourself, okay, I've done this for a few years now or months and I'm doing really well with it. I think at a high level, you could still look at your numbers, but not really budget. You know what I mean? You could even have like an app like a Rocket Money and set those limits for yourself, like in each category, and just check in sometimes with those numbers and just like make sure that you're on the right track there, but not necessarily having to track every expense or like really sit down and budget. I think you can definitely keep it high level. I don't think you need to sit down with your spreadsheet and track all of your expenses. Just make sure your big categories, like how much is your fixed cost? How much is your housing? How much are you putting into savings? Maybe keep like those 3 big buckets. And then like, okay, you're doing great. Just keep going on from there. I don't know. I think you can just keep a high level and not really worry too much about the details from that point. What do you think, Nick? Not that we know because we're still budgeting, but
still budgeting, still love it. But no, like I think it's if you can comfortably spend in those variable categories like the groceries, the gas, the dining out, even like your utilities, like on average what they tend to hit each month. Like if you can get really confident with hitting those numbers, even if you weren't looking, like, and maybe you take it one category at a time. Like maybe this month, you're in a really good place with your finances. You're like, you know what, I'm going to just try to go to the grocery store every day, however many times I need to this month, and see what the numbers look like on paper afterwards. Right. Yeah. I think if you can kind of get into that habit or at least build up almost like building up that muscle memory of spending according to the plan without looking at the plan. That's when I think you could say, all right, I know then, let's say it takes me $5,000 for me to get through the month. It covers all my expenses, everything. So you kind of just, like we talked about, you load that into your checking account or you say that that's your, kind of upper limit on your credit card. And if you can comfortably start hitting that, then my concern isn't that you're, tracking every single expense. It's are you making a plan for what's left over with your income from there to make sure that the savings stuff, I think at least at that point, making sure that the savings is kind of meticulously planned out to me is more important. If you can comfortably stay within budget for the rest of your expenses for the month, I think that's when you can kind of know like, all right, I'm ready to start transitioning out of like hardcore budgeting and more into like you said, like a general overview of the numbers. Yeah.
But I don't think it ever means like you just don't look at your numbers again. Like if you don't want to look at them even every month, I'm going to suggest like maybe every other or at least quarterly. And then have a big sit down at the end of the year and go through everything and be like, okay, this was our average amount for this, and this. Do we feel comfortable with this moving forward? Do we feel comfortable with the amount of savings we have? Do we have any debt that needs paid off? Things like that. I don't think money is, we work every single day, to make money. So like this is one of the most important things in our lives. We have to take care of it and we have to like pay attention to it. So I don't think it's something that should ever go away. We just need to get comfortable with it. and then understand it. And then maybe you can take a step back. But I think it's always going to be present in your life, you know?
Awesome. Well, I think that closes out today's episode. So as always, if you found some value from it, if you laughed at all throughout this, one thing that we ask is that you share this with a friend or consider subscribing. That's really the best way you can help us grow.
Yeah. And if you want to have your money question answered on the show, you can visit our website, justanothermoneypodcast.com, and click the submit a question button. And don't forget to join us for the next episode of Just Another Money Podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations provided on this podcast are for entertainment purposes only and do not constitute professional financial advice. Any financial decisions you make based on the content of this podcast are your responsibility. We strongly recommend consulting with a licensed financial advisor or other qualified professional before making any significant financial decisions. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge that we are not liable for any financial outcomes.